I was halfway out the door, one foot already on the porch, when my friend's mom, Mrs. Larson, called out to me. Her voice was soft but firm, like she'd been holding on to something heavy, and finally decided to let it out. "Just one question before you go," she said. I froze, my hand on the doorknob, the summer air thick with the smell of cut grass and barbecue from the neighbor's yard. That moment, that single sentence, changed everything for me. It wasn't just a question. It was a door to a truth I didn't know I'd been carrying. I didn't realize it then, but those words would stick with me, replaying in my head like a song I couldn't shake, forcing me to look at my life in a way I've been avoiding for years. Let me back up. I'm not the kind of guy who gets caught up in deep conversations or heavy moments. I'm 24, just trying to figure out life, working a part-time job at a coffee shop while I sort out what I'm supposed to do next. It's not glamorous making lattes, wiping down counters, dealing with customers who snap at you because their order's 2 minutes late. But it pays the bills barely and keeps me afloat while I tell myself I'll figure out the big stuff later. My friend Jake and I have been tight since high school. Back then, we were the kind of kids who'd stay up all night talking about dreams that felt so real. Becoming pro gamers, starting a band, maybe even moving to a big city where life would just happen. But high school ended and those dreams got fuzzy, replaced by the grind of reality. Still, we'd hang out at his place all the time, playing video games, talking about nothing important. Girls, sports, the latest dumb thing we saw online. It was comfortable, familiar, like slipping into an old pair of sneakers. Jake's mom, Mrs. Larson, was always around during those hangouts, but she was like background noise. She'd pop into the living room with a plate of snacks, chips, cookies, sometimes those little sandwiches she'd cut into triangles like we were still kids. She'd ask how school was going, even though we'd both graduated years ago, or remind Jake to take out the trash. Typical mom stuff. I never thought much of it. She was just there, part of the scenery of Jake's house, like the worn-out couch or the creaky floorboard in the hallway. I'd say hi, thank her for the food, and that was about it. She was nice, don't get me wrong, but I never saw her as someone who'd have anything profound to say. She was just Jake's mom. That day, though, was different. It was a Saturday in July, the kind of day where the heat sticks to your skin and you're constantly wiping sweat off your forehead. The kind of day where you can't wait to get inside somewhere air-conditioned, where the hum of a fan feels like a luxury. Jake and I had been hanging out at his place all afternoon, sprawled on that same old couch, playing some racing game on his PlayStation. It was one of those retro ones we used to play as kids, the kind with pixelated graphics and cheesy music. We were laughing trash, docking each other, arguing over who cheated when one of us cut a corner too sharp. It was the kind of afternoon that felt like it could have happened any time in the last 5 years, like we were still those high school kids with no real responsibilities. Mrs. Larson was in the kitchen humming to herself while she chopped vegetables for dinner. I could hear the rhythmic thud of her knife against the cutting board, the faint clatter of pots and pans as she moved around. I didn't pay much attention to her, but I noticed she seemed quieter than usual, less chatty. Normally, she'd poke her head in and make some comment about how loud we were or ask if we wanted more lemonade. That day, though, she kept to herself and I figured she was just tired or stressed. She's a nurse, works long shifts at the hospital, dealing with sick people and emergencies. I've heard Jake talk about how she comes home exhausted sometimes. Her scrubs wrinkled, her eyes heavy. I didn't think much of it, though. I was too caught up in the game, in the easy rhythm of hanging out with Jake. Around 6 p.m., I decided to head out. I had an early shift at the coffee shop the next morning. 6 a.m., the kind of shift that makes you question your life choices. I didn't want to overstay my welcome, so I grabbed my backpack, slung it over my shoulder, and shouted a quick goodbye to Jake. He yelled something back about how I owed him a rematch, and I laughed, already halfway to the front door. That's when Mrs. Larson stopped me. She was standing in the hallway, a dish towel in her hands, twisting it like she was nervous or working up the courage to say something. Her eyes locked onto mine, and for a second, I thought I'd done something wrong. Maybe I'd left a mess in the living room. Or maybe I'd forgotten to say thank you for the lemonade she'd brought us earlier. My mind raced trying to figure out what I'd screwed up. Just one question before you go, she said again, her voice steady, but with an edge I couldn't place. It wasn't angry or accusing, but it wasn't casual either. It was like she'd been waiting for this moment, like she'd been rehearsing what she was about to say. I turned around confused and nodded. "Sure, Mrs. Larson. What's up?" I tried to keep my tone light, like it was no big deal, but I could feel my stomach tighten. Something about the way she was looking at me made me uneasy, like I was about to be called out for something I didn't even know I'd done. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she just stood there, her hands still twisting that dish towel, her eyes searching mine like she was trying to see something inside me, something I didn't even know was there. It wasn't just a look. It was like she was studying me, peeling back layers I didn't know I had. I shifted my weight, the backpack strap digging into my shoulder, and waited. Finally, she spoke, her words careful and deliberate, like she'd chosen each one with care. "Do you ever think about the choices you're making? I mean, really think about where they're taking you?" I stood there caught off guard. It wasn't the kind of question I was expecting. I thought maybe she'd ask if I was coming back tomorrow or if I'd seen Jake's missing hoodie, the one he was always losing. But this was deep, heavy, the kind of question that makes you feel like you're standing on the edge of something you can't quite see. I laughed a little, trying to brush it off because that's what I do when things get uncomfortable. I try not to overthink stuff, you know. My voice sounded weak, even to me, like I was dodging something. She didn't smile. She didn't let me off the hook. She just kept looking at me, her eyes soft but intense, like she could see right through my half-asked answer. "I'm serious," she said, her voice quieter now, but no less firm. "You're at an age where the choices you make now, they're going to shape the rest of your life. And I wonder if you're paying attention." I didn't know what to say. What do you say to that? It's not like I had a script for this kind of conversation. I shifted my weight again, the floor creaking under my sneakers, and tried to come up with something that didn't sound completely stupid. "I guess I'm just trying to figure things out, Mrs. Larson. I don't really have a plan yet." It was the truth, but saying it out loud made me feel exposed, like I'd admitted to something I wasn't supposed to. She nodded like she expected that answer but wasn't satisfied with it. "That's what worries me," she said quietly, almost like she was talking to herself as much as to me. "And not just for you, but for Jake too. You boys, you're so full of potential, but you're drifting. I see it. And I don't want you to wake up one day and realize you missed your chance to be something more." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I'd heard stuff like that before, from teachers who thought I wasn't living up to my potential, from my parents when they'd lecture me about getting a real job, even from those random motivational videos that pop up on YouTube when you're scrolling late at night. But coming from her in that moment, it felt different. It wasn't freaky or condescending. It wasn't like she was trying to make me feel bad. It was like she cared, like she was seeing something in me that I wasn't seeing in myself, like she was rooting for me in a way I didn't even know I needed. I mumbled something about how I think about it, my voice barely audible, and started to turn back toward the door. I just wanted to get out of there to escape the weight of her words. But she wasn't done. She took a step closer, the dish towel still clutched in her hands, and her voice softened even more. "I'm not trying to lecture you," she said, "but I've seen too many people, good people, let life slip away because they didn't ask themselves the hard questions. And I'm not going to stand here and watch you and Jake do the same thing." I felt a lump in my throat and I wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the way she said it, like she was fighting for me, like she was refusing to let me just coast through life without at least trying to be more. I thought about my life, working at the coffee shop, barely making enough to cover rent, spending my free time playing video games or scrolling through my phone, liking posts I didn't even care about. Was that really all I was doing? Drifting like she said. I didn't want to believe it, but deep down I knew she wasn't entirely wrong. I've been telling myself I had time, that I'd figure it out eventually. But what if eventually was just an excuse? What if I was just running from the fact that I had no idea what I was doing? I stood there, my hand still on the doorknob, not sure how to respond. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do, Mrs. Larson," I admitted finally, my voice cracking a little. I hadn't meant to sound so vulnerable, but the words just came out like I want to do something with my life, but I don't even know where to start. For the first time, she smiled, but it was a sad kind of smile, like she understood exactly what I was feeling. "That's the thing," she said, her voice gentle but firm. No one's going to hand you a map. You have to figure it out yourself. But you can't do that if you're not even asking the right questions. She paused for a moment like she was giving me time to let that sink in, then added, "When I was your age, I was a lot like you. I didn't know what I wanted either. I was working odd jobs, waitressing, cleaning houses, whatever I could find to keep my head above water. Then I got pregnant with Jake, and suddenly I didn't have the luxury of drifting anymore. I had to make choices, hard ones, and I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I took jobs I hated, stayed in relationships that weren't good for me, missed opportunities because I was too scared to take a chance. But I learned something. Every choice you make, even the small ones, they add up. They become your life." I nodded, not because I fully understood, but because I didn't know what else to do. Her words were sinking in, though heavier than I wanted them to be. I thought about Jake, about how he was in the same boat as me. No real direction, just coasting through life, playing video games, working a dead-end job at a warehouse. I wondered if she'd had this same conversation with him, or if I was the one she'd chosen to unload on. Why me? What made her think I was worth this kind of talk? Why me? I asked before I could stop myself. The question slipped out raw and unfiltered, and I immediately wished I could take it back. It sounded needy, like I was fishing for something, but I genuinely wanted to know. Why was she standing here in her hallway having this conversation with me instead of her own son? She looked surprised for a second, like she hadn't expected me to ask. Then she sighed and leaned against the wall, still twisting that dish towel in her hands. "Because I see something in you," she said, her voice steady but warm. "You're not like Jake. He's content to just exist. At least for now. He's happy with the way things are. And maybe that's okay for him. But you're restless. I can tell you want more. Even if you don't know what that more is yet, and I don't want you to waste that." I didn't know what to say to that. No one had ever called me restless before, but the moment she said it, I knew it was true. I'd always felt this itch, this feeling that I was supposed to be doing something bigger, something that mattered. It was why I'd spend hours scrolling through job listings or watching videos about people who'd made it. Even though I never took the next step, I'd tell myself I wasn't ready, that I didn't have the skills or the money or the connections. But really, I was just scared. Scared of trying and failing, of finding out I wasn't good enough. And here was Mrs. Larson, someone I'd barely thought twice about, seeing it clear as day, calling it out like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I don't know how to figure it out," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. Like, how do you know what you're supposed to do with your life? I felt like a kid again, asking a teacher for the answers to a test I hadn't studied for. But I needed to know. I needed something, anything to hold on to. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to the little table in the hallway where a stack of mail and a few framed photos sat. She picked up one of the photos. Her and Jake at his high school graduation. Both of them smiling like the world was theirs. Jake had that goofy grin he always got when he was trying to look cool, but couldn't quite pull it off. And Mrs. Larson looked proud, her arm around his shoulders. "You don't always know," she said finally, her eyes still on the photo. "Sometimes you just have to try things, fail at things, learn from them, but you have to start somewhere. You have to move." I looked at the photo in her hands, at Jake's goofy grin and her proud smile. I thought about my own life, about the choices I'd been avoiding. I'd been telling myself I had time, that I'd figure it out eventually. But what if eventually never came? What if I was just wasting days, weeks, years waiting for some big epiphany that would never show up? I thought about my job at the coffee shop, how I'd been there for 2 years, telling myself it was temporary, but I hadn't done anything to make it temporary. I was just there doing the same thing day after day, letting life happen to me. "I'm scared," I admitted, surprising myself. I hadn't meant to say it out loud, but it slipped out raw and honest. "I'm scared of picking the wrong thing and screwing everything up." My voice cracked, and I looked down at the floor, embarrassed. I wasn't used to being this open, especially not with someone like Mrs. Larson, who I'd always seen as just Jake's mom. She set the photo down and looked at me, her eyes softer now, like she was seeing me for the first time, too. "Everyone's scared," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "I was terrified when I decided to go to nursing school. I was a single mom, barely making ends meet, and I thought, what if I can't do this? What if I fail? I'd stay up at night worrying about how I was going to pay for school, how I was going to take care of Jake, how I was going to make it work. But you know what? I did it anyway. And yeah, I made mistakes. I failed tests, cried myself to sleep some nights, wondered if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. But I kept going, and that's what matters. I nodded, my throat tight. I didn't trust myself to speak without my voice cracking. For the first time, I saw Mrs. Larson, not just as Jake's mom, but as a person, someone who'd been where I was, who'd faced the same fears and uncertainties, who'd had to figure it out the hard way. It made me feel less alone, but it also made me feel responsible, like I couldn't just shrug this off and go back to my life like nothing had happened. Her words were like a mirror, forcing me to look at myself, and I wasn't sure I liked what I saw. I don't want to push you, she said, breaking the silence. But I see so much in you, and I don't want you to let it slip away. Promise me you'll think about it. Really think about it. Her voice was earnest, almost pleading, like she was handing me something fragile and hoping I wouldn't drop it. I will, I said, and I meant it. I wasn't just saying it to get out of the conversation. For the first time in a long time, I felt like someone believed in me. Not just in a vague, you're a good kid kind of way, but in a real specific way, like she saw something worth betting on, something I didn't even see in myself. She smiled again, this time a little brighter, like she was relieved. Good, she said. Now go home and get some rest. You've got that early shift tomorrow, right? I laughed, the tension breaking a little. Yeah. 6 a.m. got to love those coffee orders. It was a weak attempt at humor, but it felt good to lighten the mood, to step back from the edge of whatever this moment was. She waved me off and I stepped out onto the porch, the door clicking shut behind me. The air felt different now, cooler somehow, even though the sun was still hanging low in the sky, painting the neighborhood in shades of gold and orange. I walked to my car, my mind buzzing with everything she'd said. It wasn't just a conversation. It was a wake-up call, one I didn't know I needed until it was happening. Over the next few days, I couldn't stop thinking about it. I'd be at work steaming milk for a latte or wiping down the counter, and her words would creep into my head. You're restless. You want more. I started noticing things I hadn't before, like how my coworkers at the coffee shop, some of them in their 30s and 40s, seemed stuck, like they'd given up on anything more than this. They'd joke about it, calling themselves lifers. But there was a bitterness in their voices, like they knew they'd settled for something less than they'd wanted. I didn't want that to be me. I didn't want to wake up in 10 years, still making the same drinks, still wondering what could have been. I started small. I signed up for an online course in graphic design, something I'd always been curious about, but never pursued. I'd always liked drawing, messing around with sketches in the margins of my notebooks, but I'd never thought of it as something I could actually do. It was just a hobby, something to pass the time. But maybe it could be more. I didn't know if it was the thing I was supposed to do, but it was a start, a step in some direction, even if I didn't know where it was leading. I also started journaling, which sounds cheesy, I know, but it helped. I'd sit down at night with a cheap notebook I'd bought at the dollar store, and I'd write about what I wanted, what scared me, what I was willing to try. It was messy at first, just random thoughts, half-finished sentences, lists of things I didn't even understand. But it helped me make sense of the mess in my head. Helped me see that I wasn't just drifting, that I could choose to move like Mrs. Larson said. I saw her again a few weeks later when I was over at Jake's. She didn't bring up our conversation, but she gave me a look, like she knew I'd been thinking about it. I told her about the graphic design course, how I'd been messing around with some software and actually enjoying it. She just nodded like she'd expected it and said, "Keep going." That was it, but it was enough. It felt like she was still rooting for me, still believing in that thing she saw in me. That conversation at the door, that one question, it didn't solve everything. I'm still figuring things out, still scared of screwing up. I still have days where I feel like I'm just spinning my wheels, like I'm no closer to knowing what I'm supposed to do with my life. But it made me realize something. I have a choice. Every day I get to decide who I'm going to be, what I'm going to do. And even if I don't have all the answers, I can't just stand still. I have to move. Even if it's just a small step, even if it's in the wrong direction, because at least it's something. So yeah, that's the story of the day. My friend's mom stopped me at the door and asked me one question. It wasn't just a question. It was a challenge, a push, a reminder that life doesn't just happen to you. You have to happen to it. And I'm still trying to live up to that. One small choice at a time. I kept going with the graphic design course, spending my nights hunched over my laptop, learning how to use tools I'd never heard of before. It was hard, harder than I expected. There were moments when I wanted to quit, when I'd stare at a blank screen and feel like I was kidding myself, thinking I could do something creative, something that mattered. But then I'd hear Mrs. Larson's voice in my head, telling me to keep going, telling me that every choice adds up. So I did. I'd spend hours tweaking designs, watching tutorials, trying to get better. It wasn't just about the course. It was about proving to myself that I could commit to something, that I could take a chance on myself. I started talking to Jake about it, too. Not in a pricky way, but just sharing. I'd tell him about the course, about how it was hard, but kind of exciting, too. He'd nod, half listening, but I could tell he was thinking about it. One day, out of nowhere, he mentioned he'd been thinking about taking some classes, too. Maybe something in mechanics, since he'd always liked tinkering with cars. I don't know if he'll follow through, but it felt like a small win. Like maybe Mrs. Larson's words were rippling out, touching him, too. I also started paying more attention to the people around me, not just at work, but everywhere. I noticed how some people seemed to have this quiet determination, like they knew where they were going, even if they didn't have it all figured out. I started talking to one of my coworkers, a guy named Marcus, who'd been at the coffee shop for years, but was also taking night classes to become a physical therapist. He'd tell me about his classes, about how he'd stay up late studying anatomy, about how he was doing it for his daughter so she'd have a better life. It made me think about Mrs. Larson again, about how she'd made hard choices for Jake, how she'd kept going even when it was tough. I started asking myself the questions she'd talked about. Not just big ones like what do I want to do with my life, but smaller ones too. Like, why was I spending so much time on my phone scrolling through stuff that didn't matter? Why was I still hanging out with certain people who didn't really care about me, who just wanted to party and waste time? I started cutting things out, saying no to things that didn't feel right anymore. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I'd second-guess myself, wonder if I was being too serious, too boring, but deep down it felt good. It felt like I was taking control, even if it was just in small ways. I saw Mrs. Larson a few more times over the next few months, usually when I was at Jake's. She never brought up our conversation again, but there was this unspoken understanding between us. I'd catch her eye sometimes, and she'd give me a small nod like she was checking in, making sure I was still moving. I told her about my progress in the graphic design course, how I'd started building a portfolio, how I was thinking about freelancing. She'd listen, ask questions, and always end with keep going. It became like a mantra, something I'd tell myself when things got hard. I also started thinking more about my own family, about how my parents had their own struggles, their own choices they'd made. My dad's a mechanic, always working long hours, always tired, but never complaining. My mom's a receptionist at a dental office, and she's the one who keeps everything together at home. Bills, groceries, all the little things that add up. I started seeing them differently, too. Not just as my parents, but as people who'd had to figure things out, just like Mrs. Larson. I started calling them more, asking them about their lives, about how they decided what to do. It wasn't like we had deep, soul-bearing conversations, but it felt good to connect, to understand them a little better. The graphic design course led to a few small gigs. Nothing big, just some flyers for a local business, a logo for a friend's side hustle. But it was something. It was proof that I could do more than pour coffee, that I could create something people valued. I started saving up, thinking maybe I'd take another course, or maybe I'd try to find a job in design, even if it was entry-level. The idea of leaving the coffee shop felt scary, but it also felt exciting, like I was finally moving towards something instead of just standing still. I'm not saying everything's perfect now. I still have days where I doubt myself, where I wonder if I'm on the right path, or if I'm just setting myself up to fail. I still don't have a grand plan, a clear picture of where I'll be in 5 years. But I'm okay with that because I'm doing something. I'm trying. And every time I feel like giving up, I think about that day at Jake's house, about Mrs. Larson standing in the hallway twisting that dish towel, asking me that one question that changed everything. That moment, that conversation, it wasn't just about her words. It was about the way she saw me, the way she believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. It was about the way she challenged me to be more, to ask the hard questions, to take responsibility for my own life. And I'm still working on it, still trying to live up to that challenge. But for the first time, I feel like I'm moving forward, like I'm not just drifting anymore. And that's enough for